Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rechah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and teach well. And peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, pushing this word with all truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Shalom, shalom. This your brother Quan Wath with the Great Millstone Charlotte camp, coming with a quick walk and talk lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. And I just wanted to touch on the topic, this afternoon of how these nations have all had their turn, man. Right? That's why I titled it. So like it. All the dogs have had their day. Right? Coming from that, the every dog has its day phrase, man, because they've all had their time to prosper, right? They've all had their rulerships. They've all had their, as the scriptures say, hand in our captivity, man, right? And now we're about to start seeing the tides turn, right? Everything is going to be returned to its rightful state. And that starts with Israel being on top, man, right? Starting with Yahweh Shai and the order on down, right? But I wanted to start here, right? Because, these nations, they get in this state of woe is me in regards to them being, because everybody's subjected to Esau Edom right now, right? But all these nations getting that woe is me spirit as if they didn't have their, their opportunity, to do right, as if they didn't have a chance, right, to have influence over the earth, But I'm going to start here in Luke 16 and verse 19. There was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus which was laid at his gate full of sores. And that rich man is equated to Esau, man. Right? That rich man being equated to Esau and that beggar being Israel, being in that low estate. It says, in desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And those dogs being these other nations, man, right? Because they see us begging, they see us in the low estate. And instead of helping, right, which the dogs can't help, they're the scavenge as well, right? They're in the place of, receiving the crumbs and the scraps as well, right? But instead of, coming to our aid or letting us know who we are, what they do is further our affliction, man, right? Actually, let's get that, right? Let's see. Salakia. Yep. This is Zechariah chapter 1 and verse 15. It reads, I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. Right? They're at ease right now, man. Right? Regardless of what, what they tell you, they're still at ease. Not everything's suffering, right, under the so-called white man. But compared to us, all these heathen nations have it easy, man, right? It says, for I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction, right? So they helped, push the debaucherous nature that Jake is in, push the destruction, right? They assisted Esau in keeping us down, which that's a part of that Psalms 83rd chapter, right? They were all in one consent. They understood, you know. You read in Judith, right, where it talks about how they know that in order to keep us low and separated from our power, that we have to, or that by keeping us low and separated from our power, you know, they can overtake us, man, right? That they have the ability to come and run roughshod through Israelites, because the Lord would turn his back on us, man, for our disobedience. And that's the position we're in now, you know? So those dogs, being these heathen nations, they've all had their chance, man. You know? You go through the Babylonians and the Syrians, you know? Egypt, right? Those Hamites down there, right? You go through the different Moabite and Ammonite empires, right? Elam and Ishmael as well, right? They've all had their opportunity to be the head influence, right? And it's just culminated with Esau, Edom, you know, being the worst and the longest running, you know? So now we're at the time where everything is going to be returned back to its right state, man. Its proper state, you know? So let's go back here. Or we'll get this, you know, because that's why I said, who had not had a hand in our captivity, right? This is 1 Maccabees 2, and we'll start with verse 5. It says, "And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me, woe is me. Or he said, woe is me. Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of the strangers." Right? And that was the time of the sacking of the temple, right? But we're witnessing this now, right? With our people being delivered into the hands of our enemies, man, right? On a daily basis, right? We're witnessing the sanctuary be defiled, being the, you know, your bodies, man, right? We're witnessing the minds of our people in the worst state that they've ever been, you know? And that's why we're you know, we cry out, you know, as the scripture says, sighing and crying for the abominations done in the midst thereof, man, right? That goes into, right, watching our people continually go down this downward spiral, right? It says, her temple is become as a man without glory, right? Because our people don't know who they are, right? They don't know where their power lies. They don't know the truth of the scriptures, man, right? They don't know you know, Jake likes to say, you know, we was kings and shit like that, but they don't understand the depth of that, because we truly are, but not in the way that they think, you know? And, you know, they come with that as what are these guys, Genesis, the save everybody doctrine and all, you know, shit like that, man. You know, because Jake truly doesn't have a rulership mentality. They can't understand, you know, having the heathen in subjection. They can't understand that a king needs servants, you know? You know, they're still in that slave mind. But continuing on, her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. And that's all Jake, man, right? Being carried into slavery, right? On those cargo slave ships, the sub-Saharan slave trade, right? Us being, you know, having the children killed, you know, first, you know, physically, and now spiritually and mentally, man. Right? We're seeing the death of generations through the philosophies that Esau Edom pushes, man. Right? Her young man with the sword of the enemy. That speaks for itself. Give me 1 second. How you doing? Good. But continuing on, it says her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. All these police shootings and things of that nature. Right? But again, Esau's words are likened unto swords as well. Right? The what's the word? Legislation and things of that nature. Right? Bring death to our people, man. Because now they're put in that same mindset. Right? Cross over here. Verse 10. It says, what nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? So, spoils of war. And there's been an active war against the children of Israel, man. Continually, right? And, we're watching it ramp up. But as it ramps up, we know that we're getting that much closer to our salvation, right? And that's why, all these heathen nations are going to find themselves in captivity as well, man, right? They think just because they weren't the worst that they're going to be able to, skate off. But that's far from the case, man, right? Let's get this here. And again, that's why I said, just reading this back, what nation had not had part in her spoils or in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils, right? Because that's those dogs, man, licking the sores, right? Licking those wounds, exacerbating, the infection, right? Making things worse instead of trying to make them better, which is, it's not in their lot to make things better. But now they're seeing the result of being hand in hand with these Edomites, man, right? Allowing that same philosophy into their world is destroying them now, man, right? Bringing them down, bringing them lower, So let's go here. Let me see. We'll start here. Psalm 9 and actually we'll start up a little bit. Let's see. We'll start on 15. Psalm chapter 9 verse 15. The heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made, in the net which they hid is their own foot taken, right? And the chief, heathen being Esau Edom. But all these heathen had their hands in making that net, man. They all, took part in placing these traps and snares. So now their foot is going to be taken, man, right? They prospered, They gained great glory, so to speak, off the downfall of Israel. And now they're going to be rewarded for their hand in it, man. You know, it's the Rico case, right? You know, Esau is the head name, but they all on the paperwork, man. Right? Every nation, right? You go through the table of nations, they all took part in this Rico, man. Right? And that's why the Lord's about to send this great judgment. You know, the heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made, and the net which they hid is their own foot taken. The Lord is known by the judgment which he executeth. Right? So that judgment is about to be executed soon come. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Higion Selah. The point. The wicked shall be turned into hell. And that word hell, just going into a lower state, right? Because they're up high right now, man. Living high on the hog, as they say, right? So Esau, Edom, he's living the highest, but all these heathen nations are living high, right? Ultimately off the blood, the rape, robbery, and murder of the Israelites, man, right? It says the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, right? Because they tried to ultimately wipe away the name, wipe away the legacy, wipe away the remembrance, right, of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, so that we couldn't come back, right? So that they could have a pseudo eternal kingdom, man. You know, but you know, the Lord wouldn't have it so, right? And now we're coming back. That's why it says they the nations were afraid in that Revelation 11th chapter, right? They saw us standing up. Let me see. Yep, Revelation 11 and 11. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. So that's what you're seeing right now, is that fear, you know, being put upon them, man. Right? Because everything you see take place right now is a result of these nations being in one consent. Again, going back to Psalm 83, right? The state of the earth, the state of the people, right? They're all liable, right? They all have liability in these facts, man. You know, and there's some attempts to try to reverse the damage, but it's already done, and they've already received the riches from it, man. You know. So again, like I titled the lesson, right? All the dogs have had their day, but it's our turn now, man. Right? Because soon come, you know, as the scriptures talk about the heathen being our inheritance, they're gonna be returned unto us, right? As those servants, right, in their proper stead, right? And Esau is gonna serve his captivity as well, but be completely wiped away, because the seed of the wicked has to be eradicated, man. You know, in order for the earth to be able to flourish, you know, fully, you know. But just a, you know, quick lesson to the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. You know, a quick walk and talk, man. Lord willing, it was edifying to the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. I want to close by giving our praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and teach well. And peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, pushing this word with all truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Shalom, shalom. Kwam Yasharallah and the Bible Ball. Shalom.